Welcome back to Suburban Warfare, where we expose the most outrageous neighborhood battles, HOA horror stories, and the sweet justice that follows. I'm your host Jessica, and today's story is absolutely incredible. It's about an HOA president who thought she could intercept and steal residents' mail to control information flow, until she messed with someone whose mail included federal law enforcement communications and classified government documents. She was opening my mail, reading my private correspondence, and hiding important documents. But what she didn't know was that tampering with mail containing federal investigations and witness protection communications is a federal crime that carries a 20-year prison sentence. Sometimes karma comes with handcuffs. Let me introduce you to the players in this postal nightmare that unfolded in the supposedly peaceful suburb of Willowbrook Estates, where federal crimes masqueraded as neighborhood politics. I'm Detective Sarah Chen, a 41-year-old federal investigator specializing in organized crime and witness protection programs. After 15 years working undercover operations in major cities, I transferred to a desk job coordinating witness relocations and managing ongoing investigations from a quiet suburban home office. I chose Willowbrook Estate specifically because it seemed like a boring, anonymous community where I could work on sensitive cases without drawing attention. My modest two-story colonial sits on a corner lot with excellent sightlines and multiple exit routes, occupational habits that saved my life more than once during my undercover years. The house looks completely ordinary from the outside, but inside it's equipped with secure communications equipment, multiple safes, and enough surveillance technology to monitor a small army. My work requires handling extremely sensitive documents related to ongoing federal investigations, witness testimonies, and classified law enforcement operations. Then there's Margaret Maggie Thornfield, the 56-year-old HOA president who turned neighborhood mail monitoring into her personal intelligence operation. Maggie moved to Willowbrook 5 years ago after her husband's pharmaceutical company relocated to our area. She immediately positioned herself as the concerned neighbor who just wanted to help everyone stay informed about community issues. What started as volunteering to collect mail for vacationing neighbors gradually evolved into a systematic surveillance operation. Maggie appointed herself as the unofficial mail coordinator for the entire subdivision, claiming she was helping elderly residents and busy families by organizing package deliveries and forwarding important correspondence. Her inner circle included Deputy HOA President Robert Kim, a retired postal worker who helped Maggie understand mail routing systems and delivery schedules, Treasurer Linda Santos, a former bank manager who used her financial background to analyze resident spending patterns based on their mail, and Secretary David Walsh, an unemployed private investigator who provided Maggie with techniques for steaming open envelopes and resealing them without detection. The supporting cast was equally invasive. Communications Chair Patricia Moore, who maintained detailed files on every resident's personal correspondence. Landscape Committee Head James Miller, whose crew had keys to everyone's mailboxes for maintenance purposes. And most dangerously, Security Captain Frank Torres, a wannabe cop who treated the subdivision like his personal surveillance state. When I first moved to Willowbrook Estates, the community seemed perfect for my needs. The neighborhood was quiet, the residents minded their own business, and the regular postal delivery meant I could receive sensitive documents without having to use more complex federal mail systems that might compromise ongoing investigations. For the first year, everything worked smoothly. My mail arrived on schedule, my packages were delivered safely, and I was able to coordinate multiple witness protection relocations and federal investigations from my home office without any complications. The Postal Service is critical to my work because many witnesses and informants can only communicate through specific mail protocols that ensure their safety and maintain the integrity of ongoing cases. I regularly receive sealed evidence packages, encrypted correspondence from federal agencies, and time-sensitive documents that determine whether investigations proceed or witnesses remain safe. I also work with the Postal Inspection Service on cases involving mail fraud, identity theft, and organized crime operations that use mail systems to launder money or coordinate criminal activities. My mail often includes materials that are not just confidential, they're classified at levels that require special security clearances to access. The first sign of trouble came when I noticed that some of my mail was arriving later than expected or appeared to have been handled more than normal postal processing would require. Important documents that should have arrived on specific dates were delayed by 1 or 2 days, and some envelopes showed minor damage that suggested they had been opened and resealed. Initially, I attributed these issues to normal postal service variations or package handling problems. But when a crucial witness testimony failed to arrive on schedule, potentially compromising an ongoing federal investigation, I began investigating more seriously. That's when I discovered that Maggie Thornfield had been systematically intercepting and reading the mail of multiple residents throughout Willowbrook Estates. She had convinced the local mail carrier that she was doing a community service by organizing deliveries and ensuring that important mail didn't get lost or damaged. What she was actually doing was conducting comprehensive surveillance on her neighbors' personal lives, financial situations, and private communications. She maintained detailed files on everyone's correspondence, tracked their spending patterns, and used the information to manipulate HOA politics and neighborhood social dynamics. The system worked like this. Maggie had convinced postal carrier Jennifer Lopez that the subdivision needed a mail security coordinator to prevent package theft and ensure reliable delivery. She positioned herself as a responsible community leader who would collect mail for elderly residents, sign for packages when neighbors weren't home, and coordinate delivery schedules to maximize security. Jennifer, who was overwhelmed with deliveries and appreciated having reliable community assistance, began leaving mail bundles with Maggie for distribution to residents. This gave Maggie access to everyone's mail for several hours each day before it was delivered to individual homes. During this window, Maggie and her team would photograph important documents, steam open interesting envelopes, and make copies of anything that seemed significant. They had turned Maggie's basement into a mail processing center complete with document scanners, envelope steamers, and resealing equipment. But Maggie made a catastrophic error when she began tampering with my mail. She didn't realize that interfering with federal law enforcement communications, witness protection correspondence, and classified documents constitutes multiple federal crimes, each carrying severe penalties. The situation escalated dramatically when a package containing testimony from a protected witness in a major organized crime case disappeared entirely. The witness had risked their life to provide information about a murder conspiracy, and their testimony was scheduled to be presented to a federal grand jury the following week. When the package didn't arrive, I initially contacted the Postal Service to trace its delivery status. The tracking information showed that it had been delivered to my address, but I never received it. This meant that either the package had been stolen from my mailbox or intercepted during the delivery process. I immediately implemented surveillance protocols around my property and began monitoring mail delivery patterns throughout the neighborhood. What I discovered made my blood run cold. Maggie Thornfield was conducting the most comprehensive illegal mail surveillance operation I had ever encountered outside of organized crime investigations. Using hidden cameras and electronic surveillance equipment, I documented Maggie's entire operation over a period of 6 weeks. She was intercepting mail for over 30 families, maintaining detailed intelligence files on residents' personal and financial activities, and using the information to manipulate neighborhood politics and social relationships. But the scope of her crimes became clear when I discovered that she had been opening and copying documents related to multiple federal investigations. In addition to my witness protection materials, she had intercepted correspondence related to tax investigations, immigration cases, and even military personnel records for a retired Navy officer who lived 3 streets over. Maggie had essentially created a private intelligence agency that was systematically violating federal mail laws, privacy regulations, and national security protocols. She thought she was playing neighborhood politics, but she was actually committing crimes that carried decades in federal prison. I began building a comprehensive federal case against Maggie's operation, but I knew I needed to catch her in the act with irrefutable evidence. That's when I devised a plan that would expose her crimes while protecting the ongoing investigations she had already compromised. Working with the Postal Inspection Service, I arranged for a series of test mailings that would allow us to track exactly how Maggie's operation functioned. We prepared packages and letters containing harmless but distinctive materials that would prove whether mail was being intercepted and tampered with. Simultaneously, I coordinated with federal prosecutors to prepare charges for mail theft, obstruction of justice, interference with federal investigations, and violation of witness protection protocols. Each of these charges carries substantial penalties, and Maggie's systematic approach meant she had committed hundreds of individual crimes. The plan required patience and precise timing. I needed to gather enough evidence to ensure convictions for everyone involved in the mail surveillance operation, while also protecting the integrity of the federal investigations that had been compromised by Maggie's activities. Over the next month, I documented every aspect of Maggie's crimes. I recorded her accessing my mailbox, photographed her steaming open federal correspondence, and tracked her distribution of copied documents to her HOA associates. I also identified the full network of people involved in the mail surveillance operation and documented their specific roles in the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Maggie and her team had stolen thousands of pieces of mail, violated the privacy of dozens of families, and interfered with multiple federal investigations. They had created detailed intelligence files on their neighbors that included financial information, medical records, and personal correspondence that could be used for blackmail or manipulation. But I wasn't ready to spring the trap yet. I wanted to catch Maggie in the act of tampering with the most serious type of federal mail possible: communications related to national security investigations. Working with FBI counterintelligence specialists, I arranged for a package to be delivered that contained materials marked with the highest levels of security classification. The package was designed to look like routine federal correspondence, but it actually contained tracking devices and materials that would provide irrefutable proof of tampering. The package was delivered on a Tuesday morning in November, and I watched through hidden cameras as Maggie intercepted it during her regular mail collection routine. She took it to her basement processing center, where she and David Walsh spent over an hour trying to open it without leaving evidence of tampering. What they didn't realize was that the package contained not just tracking devices, but also materials that were chemically treated to show any contact with unauthorized hands. By opening the package, they had literally left their fingerprints on evidence of their own federal crimes. But the real trap was yet to spring. Inside the package was a document requesting my assistance with a priority national security investigation that required an immediate response. The document instructed me to attend a meeting at a specific location the following day to discuss critical national security matters. The location was actually a conference room at the local FBI field office, where I had arranged for a comprehensive briefing about Maggie's mail surveillance operation. But Maggie didn't know that. She thought she had intercepted communications about a genuine national security investigation. True to form, Maggie couldn't resist acting on the information she had stolen. She contacted several of her HOA associates and arranged an emergency neighborhood security meeting to discuss the federal investigation that was apparently targeting someone in their community. The meeting was scheduled for Thursday evening at the community center, and Maggie planned to reveal selected information from my classified correspondence to demonstrate her value as a neighborhood intelligence source. She had no idea that she was about to confess to federal crimes in front of witnesses while federal agents recorded every word. I attended the meeting as a concerned resident who had heard rumors about security issues in the neighborhood. About 30 people showed up, including most of Maggie's inner circle and several neighbors who were genuinely worried about what they had been told. Maggie opened the meeting by explaining that her security monitoring activities had uncovered evidence of a serious federal investigation involving someone in their community. She displayed copies of documents that she claimed to have discovered through routine mail security checks. As your HOA president and security coordinator, she announced, I have a responsibility to keep our community informed about potential threats. Through my monitoring of suspicious mail activities, I have uncovered evidence that federal agents may be conducting surveillance operations in our neighborhood. She proceeded to describe details from the fake national security document, including references to ongoing investigations and classified operations. Several neighbors looked genuinely alarmed, while others seemed confused about how Maggie had obtained such detailed information. That's when I stood up and asked the question that would bring down her entire operation. Maggie, how exactly did you gain access to classified federal documents? Because what you're describing sounds like information that would only be available through illegal interception of mail. Her face went pale, but she tried to maintain her composure. I have legitimate security responsibilities as HOA president. Sometimes that requires monitoring unusual mail activities to protect our community. Actually, I replied, pulling out my federal badge, what you're describing is multiple federal crimes. I'm Detective Sarah Chen with federal law enforcement, and you've just confessed to stealing mail, tampering with federal communications, and interfering with national security investigations. The room erupted in shocked murmurs as I continued. For the past 3 months, I've been documenting your systematic theft and tampering with mail belonging to residents throughout this community. You've violated federal laws that carry sentences of up to 20 years in prison. Maggie's composure completely shattered. You can't prove anything. I was just trying to protect the neighborhood. Actually, I can prove everything, I said, gesturing toward the back of the room where FBI Special Agent Jennifer Walsh and Postal Inspector Michael Torres had quietly entered. We have video evidence of you stealing mail, photographs of your document processing operation, and fingerprint evidence on classified materials that you illegally opened. Agent Walsh stepped forward and addressed the shocked crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, We're conducting a federal investigation into mail theft and tampering activities that have been occurring in this community. Several residents have been victims of systematic mail surveillance that violates multiple federal laws. She then turned to Maggie and her associates. Margaret Thornfield, you're under arrest for mail theft, obstruction of justice, and violation of federal communication security. You have the right to remain silent. As Agent Walsh read Miranda rights to the increasingly panicked HOA leadership, Postal Inspector Torres began explaining to the other residents how they could determine whether their mail had been tampered with and what steps they needed to take to protect themselves from identity theft. The arrests were just the beginning of Maggie's downfall. The search of her home revealed the full scope of her mail surveillance operation, including detailed files on over 50 families, hundreds of copied documents, and equipment worth thousands of dollars that had been used to steam open and reseal mail. But the most damaging evidence was found in her digital files. Maggie had been maintaining electronic databases of her neighbors' personal information, including financial records extracted from bank statements, medical information from healthcare correspondence, and even romantic relationships discovered through personal letters. She had used this information to manipulate HOA elections, pressure residents to support her initiatives, and even blackmail neighbors who opposed her policies. The mail theft operation wasn't just about satisfying curiosity. It was a systematic effort to control the entire community through information warfare. The federal investigation revealed that Maggie's crimes had affected far more people than initially realized. She had intercepted tax documents, medical records, legal correspondence, employment information, and personal communications from dozens of families over a period of 3 years. Some of the stolen information had been used to commit identity theft and financial fraud. Linda Santos, the HOA treasurer, had used copied bank statements to track resident spending patterns and identify families who might be experiencing financial difficulties that could be exploited. David Walsh had used the surveillance information to conduct unauthorized background checks on new residents, creating detailed profiles that were shared with other HOA members to influence neighborhood social dynamics. Most seriously, Frank Torres had used the intercepted mail to identify residents who might be involved in activities he considered suspicious, including political affiliations, religious practices, and personal relationships that didn't conform to his narrow worldview. The trial was a sensation that drew national attention to the growing problem of HOA overreach and suburban surveillance. Maggie and her co-conspirators faced dozens of federal charges related to mail theft, identity fraud, privacy violations, and obstruction of justice. The prosecution's case was overwhelmingly strong. In addition to the physical evidence of mail tampering, they had recordings of HOA meetings where Maggie discussed using stolen information to manipulate residents, and digital files containing thousands of illegally obtained documents. Maggie initially tried to claim that her activities were legitimate HOA business, but the evidence clearly showed that she had been systematically violating federal law for her own personal and political benefit. Her defense collapsed when prosecutors presented testimony from residents who described being blackmailed or manipulated based on information that could only have been obtained through mail theft. The sentences were severe and sent a clear message about the consequences of mail crimes. Maggie received 15 years in federal prison for mail theft, obstruction of justice, and identity fraud. Her co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 3 to 8 years depending on their level of involvement in the surveillance operation. But the criminal convictions were only part of Maggie's punishment. The civil lawsuits were equally devastating. Over 40 families joined a class action suit seeking damages for privacy violations, identity theft, and emotional distress caused by the systematic surveillance. The lawsuits revealed that Maggie had caused financial losses totaling over $200,000 through identity theft and fraud schemes based on stolen mail information. Several families had been forced to change bank accounts, credit cards, and other financial arrangements after their information was compromised. The emotional damage was even more significant. Many residents described feeling violated and unsafe in their own neighborhood after learning that their most private communications had been systematically monitored and analyzed by their HOA leadership. The Homeowners Association itself faced bankruptcy as a result of the legal judgments and insurance claims related to Maggie's crimes. The community had to be completely restructured with new leadership and bylaws that included strict prohibitions on mail handling and surveillance activities. My own situation required extensive security reviews to ensure that the compromised federal investigations could proceed safely. Several witness protection cases had to be restructured, and multiple ongoing investigations required additional security measures due to the information that had been stolen from my correspondence. The Postal Inspection Service used the case as a training example for mail carriers throughout the region, demonstrating how seemingly helpful community volunteers can actually be conducting systematic criminal operations. Jennifer Lopez, the mail carrier who had unknowingly assisted Maggie's operation, received additional training on recognizing mail theft schemes and protecting residents' privacy. The FBI incorporated the case into their community outreach programs, using Maggie's operation as an example of how organized crime techniques are being adapted by suburban criminals who think they can avoid detection by operating in supposedly respectable communities. Most satisfying of all was the complete transformation of Willowbrook Estates from a surveillance state into a genuinely supportive community. The new HOA leadership focused on legitimate community services like organizing social events and maintaining common areas, rather than monitoring and manipulating residents' private lives. Maggie Thornfield is currently serving her sentence at a federal prison in Ohio, where she works in the mailroom under constant supervision. According to recent reports, she has developed an appreciation for mail privacy rights, though from a very different perspective than she once held. The basement that once housed her mail surveillance operation has been converted into a community meeting room where residents gather for book clubs and neighborhood planning sessions. The equipment she used to steam open mail has been replaced with coffee makers and folding chairs. My own home office continues to serve as a coordination center for federal investigations, but now with the knowledge that my mail security has been thoroughly tested and proven effective. The surveillance equipment I installed to catch Maggie's operation has been upgraded and now serves as a model for protecting sensitive federal communications in suburban environments. The lesson here extends far beyond mail theft and HOA politics. It's about the fundamental principle that privacy rights are not just legal concepts, they're the foundation of democratic society and individual freedom. When someone like Maggie decides that she has the right to monitor and control her neighbor's private communications, she's attacking the basic trust that allows communities to function. The case also demonstrates the importance of understanding that federal crimes carry federal consequences, regardless of the suburban setting or community leadership position of the perpetrator. Maggie thought she was playing neighborhood politics, but she was actually conducting systematic criminal activities that warranted serious federal prosecution. Most importantly, this story shows that expertise and patience can defeat even the most comprehensive surveillance operations. Maggie spent years building her mail theft network, but once her activities were properly investigated and documented, her entire operation collapsed within weeks. The mail system that she tried to corrupt is now more secure than ever, protected by enhanced monitoring systems and community awareness programs that prevent similar operations from taking root. The neighborhood that she tried to control through information warfare is now genuinely united by shared experiences and mutual respect for privacy rights. Sometimes justice comes through the same channels that criminals try to exploit. Maggie used mail theft to gain power over her community, but it was mail-related federal laws that ultimately brought her down. She thought she was above the law because she operated in a suburban setting with community authority, but federal crimes carry federal penalties regardless of zip code or HOA position. The irony is perfect. The woman who tried to control information through mail theft is now prohibited from handling mail as a condition of her federal sentence. She wanted to know everyone else's business, but now her own activities are monitored by federal authorities every day. Justice may be delivered through many different channels, but when it comes through the Postal Service, it arrives with the full weight of federal law enforcement, and that's a delivery that no amount of community authority or surveillance equipment can intercept. That's today's episode of Suburban Warfare. If you enjoyed watching an HOA Karen get arrested for federal mail crimes, hit that subscribe button and share your own HOA horror stories in the comments. Until next time, remember, your mail is protected by federal law, and there are some packages that carry more than just consequences. They carry prison sentences.